You want my identification? You had better be absolutely certain you want to follow this road, officer, because once I take it out, your career is over." Those were the calm, terrifyingly quiet words of Malcolm Avery, a black man wearing a bespoke suit inside an upscale coffee shop in a wealthy suburb. The stunned customers watched in silence. Officer Bryce Danner stood before Malcolm with a smirk on his face and one hand resting near his taser. Bryce believed he was intimidating a criminal suspect. He thought he was cleaning up the streets. He had no idea he was about to place the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI's Civil Rights Division in handcuffs. What began as an ordinary coffee run would become a national scandal. It would expose deep corruption within a city, destroy the reputation of an entire police department, and cost taxpayers $5.6 million. This was not merely a story about karma. It was a story about what happened when arrogance collided with real authority. Oak Haven was an affluent suburb outside Chicago. The crisp air carried the scent of fallen maple leaves and expensive espresso. Lawns were maintained with surgical precision. The cars were almost exclusively German or electric, and the Oak Haven Police Department proudly claimed that it kept undesirable people outside the community. Special Agent Malcolm Avery adjusted the cuffs of his charcoal Armani suit after stepping from a black government-issued SUV. Malcolm was not from Oak Haven. He had grown up in a difficult neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, fought his way through law school, and spent much of his career rising through the ranks of federal law enforcement. He had become a respected figure inside the bureau. Malcolm had dismantled human trafficking organizations in Washington and uncovered government corruption in New Orleans. That morning, however, he was not searching for criminals. He was searching for caffeine. He had arrived early for a high-level meeting with District Attorney Camille Rhodes. They planned to discuss the formation of a joint task force investigating organized crime. Camille had suggested the Bean and Leaf, an expensive coffee shop on Main Street known for its exclusive atmosphere. Malcolm checked his vintage Omega watch, a gift from his wife after his promotion. He had time. He pushed open the glass door. A small bell chimed above him. Inside, the shop was filled with reclaimed wood, exposed bulbs, and quiet indie folk music. Women in yoga clothes held tiny dogs. Men wearing Patagonia vests typed intensely on MacBooks. The conversation did not completely stop when Malcolm entered, but it briefly stumbled. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that cost more than some customers' cars. He carried himself with natural authority, his head held high and his eyes scanning the room out of professional habit rather than suspicion. But in Oak Haven, authority that did not come with a local police badge made certain people uncomfortable. Malcolm approached the counter. The barista, a college student named Paige Foster, looked up. Her professional smile faltered for only a moment. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice slightly higher than it had been with the previous customer. "Good morning," Malcolm replied in a deep, smooth voice. He smiled warmly, attempting to ease the tension he had become accustomed to noticing. "I'll have a dark roast black coffee and a blueberry scone, please." "For here or to go?" "For here. I'm meeting a colleague." "All right, that will be $12.50. Malcolm tapped his card against the reader and moved toward the pickup counter. While waiting, he checked his email. A message from the deputy director appeared on the screen. "The indictment is sealed. We move against the cartel later today." Malcolm allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. It was going to be a productive day. He collected his coffee and scone, then searched for a place to sit. Malcolm chose a table beside the window so he could watch for Camille's arrival. He crossed one leg over the other and took a sip of the steaming coffee. Outside, a black and white Dodge Charger moved slowly along Main Street. The words "to protect and serve" were painted across the side. Officer Bryce Danner sat behind the wheel. Bryce was an experienced member of the Oak Haven Police Department. He had been a football captain and school bully in his younger years and had never entirely moved beyond either identity. He had a thick neck, a graying buzz cut, and a personnel file filled with excessive force complaints that the police union had repeatedly helped bury. Bryce was bored. Oak Haven was quiet, too quiet. He wanted something to happen, something that would allow him to display the authority he believed he deserved. As he drove past the Bean and Leaf, he glanced through the front window. He recognized the usual patrons. Then he noticed Malcolm. Bryce did not see a senior federal agent preparing for a multi-state operation. Through the lens of his prejudice, he saw an anomaly. A black man in an expensive suit, sitting alone and watching the street. He is studying the place, Bryce thought. Maybe he is waiting for an exchange. He pulled the cruiser to the curb. Bryce did not contact dispatch. He did not check the government SUV's license plate. He simply parked, adjusted his duty belt, and stepped onto the sidewalk. The atmosphere inside the coffee shop changed as soon as the heavy door opened. Conversation faded. Customers looked from the officer to the black man seated near the window. Malcolm did not look up. He was reading a briefing on his phone, but his training registered the sound of heavy steps, the movement of equipment, and the sudden silence around him. He knew exactly who had entered. Ignore him, Malcolm told himself. He is probably a local officer making his rounds. But the footsteps did not move toward the counter. They came directly toward Malcolm. Bryce stopped beside the table. He stood there in a prolonged and uncomfortable silence, his shadow falling across Malcolm's phone. Malcolm took a measured breath. He turned off the screen, placed the device face down, and looked up with the neutral expression bureau agents often adopted during tense encounters. "Can I help you, officer?" he asked politely. Bryce did not smile. He hooked his thumbs into his vest and leaned over the seated man. "Do you live around here?" Malcolm picked up his coffee. "Is there a problem?" "I asked you a question," Bryce replied loudly enough for nearby customers to hear. "Do you live in this neighborhood?" "I don't understand why that is relevant," Malcolm said calmly. "I am a paying customer drinking coffee." "We have received complaints," Bryce lied. It was a familiar tactic: create an imaginary complaint and use it to justify demanding identification. "Reports of suspicious activity. Men matching your description have been loitering inside local businesses." Malcolm almost laughed. "Matching my description? A man in a three-piece suit eating a blueberry scone?" A woman at the next table released a nervous giggle. Bryce's face reddened. He did not appreciate being challenged in front of witnesses. "Stand up," he ordered. Malcolm remained seated. He leaned back and interlocked his fingers. "Officer, I am waiting for a business meeting. I have committed no crime and violated no law. Unless you can explain a reasonable suspicion that I am involved in criminal activity, I am going to finish my coffee." That was the decision point. A thoughtful officer would have left. A thoughtful officer might have recognized that someone speaking with that level of calmness and legal precision probably understood exactly what authority the law provided. Bryce Danner was not thoughtful. He was a bully who believed he had been embarrassed in front of an audience. "I said stand up," he shouted, dropping one hand toward the baton on his belt. "I want your identification now." Malcolm sighed with deep exhaustion. He looked at the officer with eyes that had faced cartel leaders, traffickers, and serial murderers without fear. "Officer," Malcolm said, lowering his voice into something far more serious, "you are making a mistake, a very expensive mistake. I strongly recommend that you walk away." Bryce grabbed Malcolm's arm. The moment his hand touched the expensive fabric of Malcolm's jacket, the entire dynamic inside the room changed. "Take your hand off me," Malcolm said. He did not shout. He did not flinch. He stated it as a fact. "You're resisting," Bryce yelled, performing for the report he expected to write later. He pulled Malcolm to his feet. Malcolm was slightly taller and far more solidly built. He did not violently pull away, but he stood his ground like a granite statue. "I am not resisting," Malcolm said clearly, looking toward the security camera mounted near the ceiling. "I am complying with your use of physical force. I am also stating that I do not consent to this search or seizure. I have done nothing wrong." "Turn around, put your hands behind your back." Bryce was now controlled entirely by adrenaline and ego. He spun Malcolm around and shoved him against the window. The coffee cup overturned. Dark liquid spread across the table and dripped onto the floor. "You are under arrest for disorderly conduct and failure to identify," Bryce said as he pulled out his handcuffs. "Failure to identify is not an independent offense in this state unless I am being lawfully detained in connection with a crime," Malcolm replied. "What crime am I suspected of committing? Loitering? Trespassing? The owner has not asked me to leave." He looked toward Paige behind the counter. "Miss, have you asked me to leave?" Paige stood frozen, visibly terrified. "I know." "Be quiet," Bryce shouted at her. He locked one cuff around Malcolm's wrist. The cold metal tightened painfully against his skin. Malcolm closed his eyes for a moment. He was furious, but he knew that one wrong movement could cause the officer to shoot him. Malcolm had read the reports. He understood the statistics. He had to behave perfectly. "Officer," Malcolm said quietly, "there's a leather wallet inside my jacket. Before you finish applying those handcuffs, I strongly suggest that you examine what is inside it." "I do not care what is in your wallet." Bryce forced Malcolm's other arm behind his back. "You can show it to the judge." "It is not a driver's license," Malcolm said. "It contains my federal credentials." Bryce paused. The word remained between them. "Credentials?" he scoffed. "What are you supposed to be, a security guard, a private investigator?" "Check it." Malcolm's confidence unsettled him. With one cuff secured and the other hanging from Malcolm's wrist, Bryce reached inside the suit jacket. He found a leather case. It was not an ordinary wallet. It was a badge case. Bryce opened it. A detailed gold badge gleamed beneath the coffee shop lighting. An eagle stood above bold blue lettering. "Federal Bureau of Investigation, Special Agent Malcolm Avery." Bryce stared. His mind tried to process the information, but it violently contradicted the story he had already created. It is fake, he told himself. It has to be fake. Anyone can purchase something like this online. Nice toy, Bryce said, throwing the badge onto the coffee-covered table. Impersonating a federal officer is a felony. Now you are in serious trouble. The customers gasped. A man in the corner rose from his chair. Officer, that badge looks genuine. Sit down, Bryce shouted. He closed the second cuff around Malcolm's wrist. You think I am stupid? You expect me to believe an FBI agent is sitting inside a coffee shop in Oak Haven? Malcolm breathed deeply. My badge number is 8940. My supervisor is Assistant Director Evelyn Shaw. If you run my name through the National Crime Information Center, it will identify me as a protected federal employee. If you place me inside your vehicle, you will be unlawfully transporting a federal agent. We will see about that. Bryce pushed Malcolm toward the door. The customers had taken out their phones. They recorded the calm, well-dressed black man being forced from the coffee shop by an enraged officer. The footage was already reaching social media platforms. Outside, Bryce pushed Malcolm against the hood of his cruiser and searched him roughly. He discovered Malcolm's Glock 19M inside a hip holster. Gun! Bryce shouted, jumping backward and drawing his own weapon. He has a gun. I am a federal agent, Malcolm said with his face against the hood. That is my service weapon. It is registered to the United States government. Shut your mouth. Bryce removed the Glock and placed it on the roof of the cruiser, far beyond Malcolm's reach. You are fortunate I did not shoot you. Bryce activated his radio. Dispatch Unit 4 Alpha. I have one male in custody, uncooperative, armed, carrying possible false credentials, requesting transport. The dispatcher acknowledged him. Malcolm turned his head slightly. A silver Mercedes sedan came rapidly around the corner and stopped directly behind the cruiser, blocking it. The driver's door opened. A woman in a sharp navy blazer stepped out, holding a briefcase. Her blonde hair was secured in a severe bun. It was District Attorney Camille Rhodes. She stopped when she saw the police cruiser, the customers watching through the coffee shop window, and Malcolm handcuffed against the hood. Her face became pale. Then fury turned it red. Officer! Camille shouted, dropping her briefcase onto the pavement. What are you doing? Bryce turned toward her with irritation. Step back, lady. This is an active crime scene. Camille marched toward him. She was small, but she moved with the force of a hurricane. I am not a lady. I am the district attorney for this county, and the man you have handcuffed is the assistant special agent in charge of the FBI's Civil Rights Division. Bryce blinked. He looked at Camille. Then he looked at Malcolm. Through the shop window, he could still see the federal badge lying on the table. He had a fake badge, Bryce stammered as his confidence began to collapse. He was loitering. He had a gun. He is permitted to carry a gun, Camille yelled directly into his face. He is a federal agent. Remove those handcuffs immediately. Bryce swallowed. He looked toward Malcolm. Malcolm slowly lifted himself from the hood and faced the officer. The expression in his eyes was no longer anger. It was pity. It is too late for that, Camille, Malcolm said. Do not remove them. Bryce froze with the key in his hand. What? I said, do not remove the handcuffs. You have already detained me. You arrested me, seized my weapon, and accused me of impersonating a federal officer. We are going to your station, Officer Danner. You will process this arrest because I want every second preserved in an official record. Sir, Bryce's hands began shaking. If you really are who she says, there is no if, Malcolm interrupted. You wanted to demonstrate your power. You wanted an arrest. Let us go. Read me my rights. Bryce remained paralyzed. The reality of his actions was crashing around him. He had assaulted and arrested a senior federal official. Read me my rights, Malcolm ordered. 3 additional vehicles arrived. They were not Oak Haven police cars. They were black Chevrolet Tahoes with tinted windows and government plates. The doors opened and 6 men and women in tactical equipment emerged wearing jackets marked FBI. They did not aim weapons at Bryce, but their presence overwhelmed the scene. Senior Agent Grant Mercer approached. Officer, Grant said in a gravelly voice, I believe you have my supervisor in handcuffs. Step away from him slowly. Bryce moved backward and raised his hands. Malcolm looked toward Camille. Call Preston Vale. Contact the media. I want the public to witness everything. The cameras continued recording. Oakhaven's nightmare was only beginning. The drive to the police station felt less like a prisoner transport than a funeral procession for Bryce Danner's career. Bryce drove without speaking, his hands gripping the wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His gaze repeatedly moved to the rearview mirror, not toward Malcolm, but toward the federal convoy behind them. 3 black Tahoes followed closely, with their grille lights flashing silently. They were not aggressive. They were relentless. Every turn Bryce made, the federal vehicles followed. Whenever he slowed, they slowed. They resembled a pack of predators following wounded prey. Malcolm sat calmly in the rear seat despite the handcuffs. He positioned himself so he could see through the side window. He was not thinking about the pain in his wrists. He was thinking about Title 18, Section 242 of the United States Code, deprivation of rights under color of law. "You are quiet back there," Bryce said, his voice beginning to crack. He wanted Malcolm to shout or threaten him, anything that could provide a justification. If he threatens me, I can add another charge, Bryce thought. Terroristic threats. Something. Malcolm remained silent and watched Oakhaven's manicured lawns pass outside. "I said you were quiet," Bryce snapped as his confidence thinned. "You know, if you apologize for resisting, I might speak with the chief. We can fix this. Maybe a citation. You walk away." Malcolm finally looked through the divider and met Bryce's eyes in the mirror. "Officer Danner," Malcolm said without emotion, "you believe this is a negotiation." "It is not. You have already committed the act. The timeline is established. Anything you say now is additional evidence that may be used during your sentencing." Bryce struck the steering wheel with his palm. "You think you are untouchable because you have a badge? This is my town. The chief will support me. The union will protect me." "Drive the vehicle," Malcolm replied. They reached the station. Normally, the building was Bryce's place of safety, a blue fortress. That day, it felt like a trap. As he entered the secure parking area, the federal Tahoes surrounded the entrance and prevented anyone from leaving. Bryce opened the rear door. He took Malcolm's arm, but his grip was now weak and uncertain. "Walk," he muttered. They entered the booking area. The desk sergeant, Russell Pike, looked up from his computer while holding a half-eaten donut. "What have you got, Bryce? Another stray?" Russell joked without fully raising his eyes. "Process him," Bryce said, pushing Malcolm toward the counter. "Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and impersonating a law enforcement officer." Russell looked up. He saw the expensive suit and the calm expression. Then he recognized Malcolm's face. He froze. "Bryce." "Just book him," Bryce said, now sweating heavily. "Bryce," Russell whispered as he slowly stood. "Look at the monitors." Bryce turned toward the wall of security screens. The lobby cameras showed complete chaos. The front doors had opened. 6 FBI agents wearing tactical vests were securing the perimeter. Camille stood at the front desk, shouting at the receptionist so loudly that the security audio distorted. A news van was already arriving outside. "Who is this man?" Russell asked, his face pale. Malcolm leaned against the counter, the handcuffs striking the laminate surface. "My name is Special Agent Malcolm Avery, and I would like to speak with your police chief." The heavy door separating the booking area from the offices opened violently. Chief Conrad Bain stormed inside. Conrad spent more time at country club dinners than at crime scenes. He had silver hair, an unnaturally orange tan, and a legendary temper. He held a phone against his ear while someone shouted on the other end. Conrad ended the call and looked first at Bryce, then at Malcolm. "Remove those handcuffs," he ordered in a low growl. "Chief, he resisted," Bryce began desperately. "He has a false badge." "I said remove them," Conrad roared. His voice echoed from the concrete walls. "Do you have any idea who is just speaking to me? The Illinois Attorney General. The governor's office is waiting on another line." Bryce searched for the keys. His hands shook so violently that he dropped them. They struck the floor and slid toward Malcolm's shoes. Malcolm did not move. He looked down at the keys and then at Bryce. "Pick 'em up," Malcolm said. Humiliated, Bryce bent down, grabbed the keys, and removed the cuffs. Malcolm rubbed his wrist. He checked his watch and straightened his jacket. Then he looked at the chief. "Chief Baines, I am retaining those handcuffs as evidence. Place them inside an evidence bag." "Agent Avery," Conrad said, forcing a political smile and extending one hand. "I am deeply sorry. There's clearly been a serious communication failure. Officer Danner's overzealous, but we can correct this. Come into my office. We can discuss it over coffee, real coffee, not what we serve in the break room." Malcolm looked at Conrad's extended hand. He did not accept it. "I do not want coffee. I want to file a formal complaint. Then I want to sit inside your interrogation room." "My interrogation room?" Conrad stared at him. "Sir, you are free to leave. We are obviously dismissing every charge." "No," Malcolm replied. "I was arrested and transported here. I want the complete experience." If this ends now, your attorneys will later describe it as a brief detention. You brought me here for booking. I want you to interview me on the official record with the cameras operating. Conrad looked at Bryce with an expression promising violence. Danner, report to my office immediately. No, Malcolm interrupted. Officer Danner remains in the squad room. He is the arresting officer, and he must write his report. If you allow him to leave, he will have time to coordinate his story with a union representative. He writes it now. Conrad realized he no longer controlled his own station. FBI agents stood beyond the glass booking room door, watching silently. Fine, Conrad said through clenched teeth. Danner, go to the squad room and begin typing. If you omit a single detail, I will dismiss you myself. Bryce walked away like a condemned man. Malcolm turned toward the chief. After you. The interrogation room was ordinary. Beige cinder block walls. A steel table bolted to the floor. A two-way mirror that everyone understood was present. Malcolm sat in the suspect's chair. Conrad sat opposite him. Camille remained in the corner with her arms crossed, watching the chief like a hawk. Agent Avery, Conrad began, folding his hands. I have known Bryce Danner for a long time. He is old-fashioned. He makes mistakes, but he's a family man. He has 2 children. I have 3, Malcolm answered. My eldest is a teenage boy who drives a Honda Civic through communities like this on the way to soccer practice. If Officer Danner had stopped my son instead of me, would he be sitting in this room, or would he be inside a morgue? Silence filled the room. That is speculation, Conrad said, pulling at his collar. We are not here to discuss hypothetical situations. We are here to discuss patterns and practices, Malcolm corrected him. While I was sitting inside the patrol car, my team obtained the statistics for the Oak Haven Police Department. Malcolm removed a folded briefing document from his pocket. He had written notes on its reverse side during the drive. Officer Danner has 14 excessive force complaints. 12 involve members of minority communities. Your Internal Affairs Division sustained none of them. You personally approved every exoneration. Conrad's expression hardened. Internal Affairs is independent. Internal Affairs is Sergeant Russell Cole, Officer Danner's brother-in-law. Is that correct? The chief's face lost its color. How did you? I am with the FBI, Chief. We know how to find information. But this is now larger than one prejudiced officer. This concerns a corrupt department, and you are responsible for it. Camille stepped forward. Chief, I am informing you that I will not prosecute Agent Avery. I will, however, immediately open an investigation into your department's use of force practices. You cannot do that, Camille. We are on the same side. Not anymore, she answered coldly. You embarrassed the county, violated a federal agent's civil rights, and placed everyone around you at risk. I will not sync with your department. A young officer opened the door. Chief, we have a problem in the lobby. What now? Conrad demanded. The press is everywhere. Civil rights attorney Preston Vale has also arrived. Conrad lowered his head into his hands. Preston Vale was among the most feared civil rights attorneys in the Midwest. He treated lawsuits against cities like a competitive sport. If he was already inside the building, the complaint was probably drafted. Malcolm stood. He is my attorney. I contacted him from the coffee shop. Malcolm approached the two-way mirror and stared at his reflection, knowing someone stood beyond it. This interview is over. Chief, preserve every body camera recording, patrol car recording, and security file connected to the coffee shop. If even 1 second disappears because of a technical failure or server error, I will personally pursue obstruction of justice charges. Do we understand one another? Conrad nodded in defeat. We understand. Malcolm left the room. Camera flashes filled the lobby. Reporters crowded the small space. Preston Vale, a tall man wearing an immaculate pinstripe suit, was already addressing them. This was a flagrant abuse of power, Preston declared. Officer Danner saw a black man inside a coffee shop and decided that his existence was a criminal offense. This city will pay for that decision. Malcolm did not speak with the press. He did not need to. The image of him leaving the police station surrounded by federal agents while adjusting his suit communicated more than any prepared statement could. He walked toward his government SUV, which another agent had brought to the station. Camille followed him. Malcolm. He turned. I am sorry our meeting was disrupted, he said. Forget the meeting. Are you all right? I am fine, Malcolm answered. But they are not. Camille, I want Officer Danner's badge. You will have it, she promised, but Preston is discussing a lawsuit worth millions. Malcolm looked toward the station. Bryce watched from an upper window, his silhouette filled with regret. This is not about money, Malcolm said. It is about cost. They must learn that freedom is not free, but oppression will become extremely expensive. Malcolm entered the SUV. Let us leave, he told the driver. As they pulled away, Malcolm checked his phone. An email contained the Bean and Leaf's security footage. The owner, frightened of becoming involved, had submitted it directly to the FBI. Malcolm watched. The recording was high definition and included clear audio. It showed him sitting peacefully. It showed Bryce approaching aggressively without cause. Malcolm forwarded the file to Preston. The subject line contained only 3 words: the smoking gun. The first domino had fallen. The others were about to follow. Inside the station, Conrad entered crisis mode. He stormed into the squad room where Bryce stared at an empty report on his computer screen. "Are you an idiot?" Conrad whispered furiously. "A complete idiot? Chief, I can fix this." Bryce stood. "I reviewed the law. If I can establish reasonable suspicion based on an emergency call, qualified immunity protects us." "There was no emergency call, Bryce." "We can create one," Bryce whispered. The room became silent. "What did you say?" "I have an unregistered phone," Bryce explained, his eyes desperate. "We make the call now and insert it into the earlier timeline. We say someone reported a man with a gun. That gives me probable cause to search him. If I had probable cause, the civil rights lawsuit collapses." Conrad stared. The plan was illegal. It was a felony. It was insanity. But Conrad thought about his pension, the upcoming election, and the $5.6 million hole the lawsuit might create in the city's budget. He walked to the door, closed it, and locked it. Then he disabled his body camera. "How do we do it?" the chief asked. The 2 men were digging a hole so deep that neither would ever escape it. They did not know that Malcolm's seemingly ordinary Omega watch was modified FBI technology. It had recorded audio throughout the incident. It continued recording from inside an evidence bag resting on the chief's desk beyond the thin squad room wall. The room felt like a pressure cooker. The blinds were closed. The door remained locked. Conrad sat before his computer, his face illuminated by the pale blue screen. Bryce paced behind him, biting his fingernails until they bled. "Are you certain this will work?" Bryce whispered. "What if the federal agents discover that we altered the server?" "Be quiet," Conrad snapped while typing. "They are not examining our local dispatch system. They are examining your actions. Once we produce a lawful reason for your stop, the pressure disappears. We only need probable cause." Conrad opened the computer-aided dispatch system. As chief, he possessed administrative access. He could view, edit, and remove entries. The function existed to correct errors, not to rewrite history. "We need a report entered shortly before the encounter," Conrad muttered. He created a new record. Call type: suspicious person, man with firearm. Location: Bean and Leaf, 114 Main Street. Caller: anonymous. Description: black male wearing a suit. Patron observed firearm near waistband and feared for personal safety. Conrad saved the entry. It entered the official timeline and appeared indistinguishable from the legitimate calls around it. "There," he said, leaning back. Dispatch received a report about an armed individual matching the suspect's description. That explains why you entered the business and approached aggressively. You believed you were confronting a possible active shooter. Bryce looked at the screen. Relief moved across his face. "It looks real." "It is real now," Conrad said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "This is the official record. When Preston Vale subpoenas the logs, this is what he receives. He sees it, understands that he cannot win, and accepts a small settlement." They looked at each other. The secret between them could send both men to federal prison. "Now wash your face," Conrad said. "You look guilty. I will return Avery's property, apologize, and get him out of this building." Conrad unlocked the door and approached the desk sergeant counter. A transparent evidence bag contained Malcolm's watch, badge case, and phone. The chief picked it up. He did not notice the faint red pulse on the watch face. He did not know that the device had an extended battery and a microphone sensitive enough to record conversation from the nearby room. It had remained close to the squad room door throughout their conspiracy. Conrad returned to the lobby with a forced smile. Malcolm stood beside Preston. "Agent Avery," Conrad said, handing him the evidence bag. "These are your personal belongings. Again, I offer the department's deepest apology. Officer Danner acted with incomplete information." Malcolm accepted the bag without smiling. He removed the watch and secured it around his wrist. Then he touched the glass surface. The display flickered. A small symbol appeared. "Recording saved." Malcolm's eyes narrowed. He looked at Conrad. Then he looked toward the squad room door. Incomplete information, Malcolm repeated. Is that your explanation? We are performing a complete internal review, Conrad lied smoothly. We believe there may have been an error involving a call for service. A call for service? Preston repeated, instantly alert. My client was purchasing a scone. There was no call. We will see what the records show, Conrad said, his confidence returning. Have a good day. Malcolm and Preston left the station. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows across the parking lot. Once they were inside Preston's black sedan, Malcolm turned toward his attorney. Do not settle. I was not planning to, Preston answered. But if they produce an emergency call record, the case becomes more complicated. It gives them legal protection. Malcolm raised his wrist and displayed the audio waveform. They fabricated it. Preston stared. What do you have? I recorded the chief and Officer Danner conspiring to create a false dispatch entry. Every word is clear. A slow, predatory smile appeared on Preston's face. Do not give this to them yet, he said. Do not release it to the press. Why? Because if we reveal it now, they resign. They might receive probation or a minor punishment. We wait until the depositions. We place them under oath. We allow them to lie on the official record and commit perjury. Then we reveal the evidence. That is how we secure $5.6 million. More importantly, that is how we ensure neither man ever wears a badge again. The deposition took place inside a glass and mahogany conference room overlooking the Chicago skyline. The law offices of Vail and Associates had been designed to intimidate. Bryce Danner and Chief Conrad Baines sat on one side of a large table. Beside them was the city attorney, Graham Whitlock, a nervous man who smelled faintly of antacid medication. Malcolm and Preston sat opposite them. A court reporter waited at the head of the table with her hands positioned above the stenotype machine. A video camera recorded the proceedings. This is the deposition of Officer Bryce Danner in Avery versus the City of Oak Haven, Preston announced. He began slowly, asking about Bryce's training, professional background, and disciplinary history. Bryce responded with a rehearsed arrogance. He believed the false call log protected him. It had already been produced during discovery. Officer Danner, Preston said, leaning forward, why did you enter the Bean and Leaf on the day of this incident? I was responding to a dispatch report, Bryce answered confidently. There was a man carrying a gun. I see. How did you receive that information? It came over the radio and appeared on my computer terminal. Dispatch transmitted it. And the description was a black male wearing a suit with a firearm near his waistband? Malcolm remained perfectly still. He watched Bryce's eyes and noticed the smallest movement near the corner, an involuntary sign. You are absolutely certain the call existed before you entered the coffee shop? Preston asked. You did not approach Mr. Avery first and search for justification afterward? Absolutely not, Bryce scoffed. That would be illegal. I followed procedure. Chief Baines, Preston said, turning toward Conrad, you supervised the retrieval of those dispatch records. Can you confirm that they are authentic? Conrad adjusted his tie. Yes, I personally retrieved the logs. The call was entered before the stop. Interesting. Preston reached into his briefcase. The room became silent. Graham stopped clicking his pen. He sensed that something had changed. I have a forensic analysis of the Oak Haven Police Department's digital server, Preston said as he removed a USB drive. More importantly, I have an audio recording. Objection, Graham stammered. What recording? My client is a senior federal agent. He wears a device capable of recording high-quality audio during field operations. When he was arrested, the department seized his property and placed it inside an evidence bag on the desk sergeant counter. Conrad's face drained of color. He remembered where the bag had been placed. This recording captured a conversation between Chief Baines and Officer Danner after the arrest. Preston connected the USB drive to his laptop and raised the volume. Conrad's voice filled the room. Clear. Undeniable. We only need probable cause. We need to place a call on the record shortly before the incident. Then Bryce's voice followed. It looks real. Conrad spoke again. It is real now. When Preston Vail requests the logs, this is what he receives. The silence that followed was suffocating. Bryce looked physically ill. Conrad stared at the table with his mouth slightly open while his career disappeared around him. Graham closed his folder and moved his chair backward. I need a recess. I must call the mayor. No. Malcolm spoke for the first time. He stood and walked around the table. He no longer appeared to be a victim. He looked like the assistant special agent in charge. There will be no recess, Malcolm said, because this is no longer a civil deposition. The conference room door opened. 4 FBI agents entered. They wore suits rather than tactical equipment, but the handcuffs on their belts were real. Conrad Baines and Bryce Danner, one agent announced. You are under arrest for conspiracy to deprive civil rights, obstruction of justice, and perjury. Bryce stood in panic. You cannot arrest us here. We have immunity. Qualified immunity may protect officers from certain civil claims arising from mistakes, Malcolm said, leaning closer to him. It does not protect you from federal prison when you commit felonies. The agents handcuffed Bryce, then they handcuffed Conrad. The video camera continued recording. The court reporter continued typing, preserving every word of their collapse. Mr. Whitlock, Preston said to the terrified city attorney, the settlement demand has increased. We now require $5.6 million and a federal consent decree governing the Oak Haven Police Department. Reject the offer, and this recording will be released to the national press immediately. Graham looked at the handcuffed police chief and then at Malcolm. I will draft the payment, he whispered. Malcolm watched Bryce and Conrad being led through the law firm's lobby past stunned employees and clients. Hard karma, Preston murmured. Not karma, Malcolm corrected him as he buttoned his jacket. Justice. Karma is luck. Justice requires work. The courtroom of the United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois was filled beyond capacity. Reporters, civil rights activists, and Oak Haven residents occupied every available seat. They had watched their community's reputation collapse on national television. Bryce and Conrad stood before Judge Everett Calloway. They no longer wore police uniforms or expensive suits. They wore orange prison clothing. The transformation was striking. Bryce, once broad and arrogant, appeared weakened after losing considerable weight in pretrial custody. Conrad looked ghost-like, his hands trembling upon the defense table. Judge Calloway was known for severe sentences in corruption cases. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at them. During my years on this bench, the judge began, his voice carrying through the silent courtroom, I have encountered people who steal because they are hungry and people who kill because they are angry. What stands before me is in some ways even more destructive. You robbed this community of its trust. You attempted to destroy the very concept of justice because your egos could not tolerate a black man possessing greater authority than you. Bryce lowered his eyes toward his shackles. Bryce Danner, for depriving a citizen of his rights under color of law and falsifying official records, I sentence you to a lengthy term in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Rachel Danner sobbed from the back row. Bryce closed his eyes. He would miss his children growing up. He would miss his daughter's graduation. He would miss much of their lives. Conrad Baines, the judge continued, turning toward the former chief, you were the captain of this vessel. Your responsibility was to prevent this corruption. Instead, you deliberately steered the department into destruction to protect yourself. For conspiracy and obstruction of justice, I impose an even longer federal prison sentence. Federal marshals approached. Malcolm stood from his seat in the front row. Bryce paused while being led away. He looked toward Malcolm. The anger had disappeared from his eyes. Only hollow regret remained. Bryce opened his mouth, perhaps intending to apologize. A marshal pushed him forward. Keep moving, inmate. The word struck the courtroom like a hammer. The transformation was complete. The predator had become the prisoner. The consequences did not end with incarceration. Oak Haven City Council soon held an emergency public meeting. The town hall overflowed with angry residents. Their anger was directed not at Malcolm, but at the police department. The $5.6 million settlement had been finalized. Because the police department's insurance policy excluded deliberate misconduct, the insurer refused to cover the loss. The fabricated dispatch record and criminal conspiracy proved the incident had not been an accidental error. It was an intentional crime. The settlement had to be paid from the city's general fund. Under the glare of the lights, the mayor announced the consequences. To pay this judgment, the city must cancel the planned renovation of the high school football stadium. Library operating hours will be reduced by 50%, and property taxes will increase by 4.5% for several years. The room erupted. Oak Haven's affluent residents had supported the police department without asking difficult questions. Now they were experiencing the cost of that support. They understood too late that corruption was not only a moral failure, it was a financial liability. The blue wall of silence had cost them their football stadium. Malcolm watched the council meeting from his Chicago office. Then he turned off the television. You received everything you wanted, Camille said. She had resigned as district attorney and entered private practice because she could no longer tolerate the corruption she had uncovered. They are in prison. The city is paying. You won. Not yet, Malcolm replied. There is one final step. The $5.6 million settlement check rested on his desk. It was enough money to transform a life. Malcolm could retire. He could purchase a home in the Caribbean and disappear. But he was an FBI agent. He had never pursued the case for personal profit. I am not keeping it, Malcolm said. Camille stared at him. Malcolm, are you serious? I do not want their money, he replied, walking toward the window. I want their legacy. He picked up a file. The paperwork has already been submitted. I am using the entire $5.6 million to establish a nonprofit organization in Oak Haven." "What kind of organization?" Malcolm smiled for the first time since the coffee shop encounter. "A legal defense fund. It will provide free, high-quality representation to anyone in this county who is wrongfully stopped, searched, arrested, or detained by law enforcement. We will employ the best civil rights attorneys in Illinois. We will audit arrests. Whenever the department abuses its authority, we will sue." Camille's mouth fell open. "You are going to use the city's own money to monitor its police department permanently." "That is not even the best part." Malcolm handed her the foundation's brochure. Camille read the name printed across the front. Then she gasped and burst into laughter. "The Danner Baines Center for Civil Rights. You named it after them." "I want their names remembered," Malcolm said, his expression hardening. "I want every officer in that station to pass the building and see the names Danner and Baines displayed in large letters. I want them to remember that abusing authority may do more than send an officer to prison. It may force that officer to finance the very people he tried to oppress." Malcolm put on his sunglasses. "Come on, Camille. Let us get coffee. I know a place." That was how one ordinary coffee run destroyed a corrupt administration. Officer Bryce Danner believed he was detaining a suspect. Instead, he detained the architect of his own downfall. The story remains a brutal reminder that authority is not permission to bully. In a world filled with cameras where the truth may be only one subpoena away, the old methods of hiding police misconduct are disappearing. Bryce Danner and Conrad Baines learned that when someone strips another person of fundamental rights, the cost may be enormous. For Oak Haven's residents, the $5.6 million judgment and higher taxes became a daily reminder that remaining silent in the presence of injustice was never free. Malcolm Avery demonstrated that the most powerful weapon a person could carry was not a firearm. It was the truth. When this story makes your blood boil or when Malcolm's recording makes you cheer, press the like button so the story reaches more people. What do you think of Malcolm's final decision? Was naming the Civil Rights Center after the corrupt officers the perfect consequence, or should he have kept the settlement for himself? Share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe and activate notifications for more stories about accountability and justice. Stay safe. Understand your rights. We will see you in the next story.